Before we dive into this spine-chilling story, please subscribe now for daily tales you won't want to miss. I didn't think I'd end up here. Working the night shift at an old, abandoned railway station? That wasn't the plan. But after everything that happened, I didn't know where else to go. Losing my family, it changed everything. I can't even begin to explain how it feels to have your whole world turned upside down like that. One moment, they were all there, my wife, kids, everything seemed right, and the next, they were gone. No warning, nothing. A car accident. It was quick, but it didn't make it any easier. When you lose everything like that, it's like you're stuck in this place where nothing makes sense anymore. I tried staying in the city after, but it felt suffocating. Everywhere I went, there were reminders, people asking, talking, pitying me without even knowing how bad it hurt. I couldn't stand it. I needed a way out, a place to just disappear, and this job seemed like the perfect solution. I didn't plan on staying long. Honestly, I wasn't interested in the station itself or the trains, but after the accident, nothing mattered. The job offer felt like a chance to escape, to get away from all the people who knew me and the memories that wouldn't leave. The station was isolated, forgotten by most, and that's exactly what I needed. The first few nights were quiet, too quiet. The station had been closed for years, and my job was simple: keep an eye on things until the morning crew showed up. A few late-night trains would pass through, but they didn't bother me. Something was off about this station. It wasn't just the silence, though that was part of it. I kept telling myself it was just the emptiness of the place getting to me, but I knew it was more. There was something here, something I wasn't supposed to understand. It wasn't until the second night that I found the rules. I was just cleaning up when I stumbled across a box of old train tickets. They were hidden in the lost and found, forgotten among a bunch of other stuff. I thought it was just some leftover junk, but when I started looking at the tickets, I saw something strange. Each one had a note scribbled on the back. At first, I thought it was just some weird thing left behind by a previous worker. But the more I read, the more unsettled I felt. These weren't just random scribbles. They were warnings. They were rules. I wrote them down, not really thinking much of it. Maybe it was just an old tradition, something left behind by workers who'd come and gone. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like these rules weren't just about running the station. They were about surviving it. They were there for a reason. I could feel it. Here's what I found. Rule 1. If the wind picks up, immediately close all the windows. Rule 2. If the light flickers more than 3 times in a row, hide in the control room. Rule 3. If you hear footsteps in the station, do not follow them. Rule 4. Never enter the maintenance room alone. Rule 5. Never let the clock tick backward. The last rule, about the clock, stuck with me the most. I didn't get it. A clock? Why would that matter? I didn't understand it, but deep down I knew I had to follow the rules. I didn't know why, but the station felt wrong. I didn't know what was going on with the station, but it was getting harder to ignore. The silence, the shadows, the way everything felt like it was breathing around me. It was too much. I told myself it was just the loneliness talking. I was in this empty station, miles from anywhere, with nothing but my own thoughts for company. The worst part was the emptiness. When you lose your family, it's like the whole world becomes hollow. Everything around you seems fake, like it's all just a distraction from the fact that they're gone. I thought I could outrun it. I thought working nights here would help me forget, help me stop thinking about them. But every corner I turned, I could still feel their presence. I could still hear my wife's voice, my kids laughing, and it hurt like nothing else. It was like their deaths had left a hole in me that nothing could fill. I didn't know how to be here without them. I thought this job would help me push those feelings aside. So, here I was, alone, stuck in the dark at a place no one cared about. Follow the rules, stay out of trouble, and maybe, just maybe, I'd figure out what the hell was going on with this place. The first few hours went by without any problems. I spent most of the time sitting in the control room, flipping through some old logs and keeping an eye on the station's systems. Everything was running smoothly, and that was a relief. I liked that quiet, routine feeling of just getting through the night. The sound of the station was the usual. The only real noise came from the trains passing through every now and then. The station wasn't used much, so it was mostly empty, except for the occasional late-night freight or passenger train rumbling through the tracks, their wheels clacking against the rails. Around midnight, I took a walk around the platform to check the exterior lights and make sure everything was secure. The wind had picked up a little, but not much. Just a soft breeze blowing through the cracks in the walls. The sound of it whooshing by was a constant background hum, but it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. By 3:30 a.m., things were still running as usual. I was sitting at the control panel, staring at the monitors, half watching the flicker of the station's lights. The silence was almost too much, But I got used to it. Then I heard it. A gust of wind, sharp and sudden. It hit the station with a force that rattled the windows. The sound was loud, whoosh, like something slamming into the glass. At first I thought it was just a draft, but it was too strong, too sudden for it to be normal. I glanced at the clock. 3:30 a.m. No rain, no storm. It was a clear night, just wind, but it didn't make sense. The station was old, but I hadn't felt wind like that in the air before. I stood up from the control panel, hearing the sound of my chair scraping against the floor. I wasn't sure if the station made that sound on purpose or if it was just old, but it had a way of echoing through the empty hall. I remembered the rule then, the one I'd written down earlier. If the wind picks up, immediately close all the windows. I walked over to the nearest window, the thud of my boots against the floor, loud in the quiet. The glass was vibrating slightly under the pressure of the wind. I grabbed the handle and pushed it down, but the wind was still pushing against it, almost like it didn't want to let go. The sound felt like it was coming from all directions at once. I locked it shut and then moved to the next window. I didn't want to stand around waiting for something else to happen, so I just kept moving. The glass rattled as I locked each one. Clink, clink, clink as the locks clicked into place. As soon as I finished, the wind died down. It wasn't a gradual change either. It just stopped, as if someone had switched it off. The building fell back into that strange, unsettling silence. I stood there for a moment, looking out at the dark platform through the glass. The wind was gone, but I could swear I could still hear it, echoing in the distance, like something was waiting. I shook my head. It was probably just my mind playing tricks on me. I had to get back to work. But there was something about the way the station felt after that, like it had shifted, like it was waiting for something. I couldn't explain it, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I told myself it was just nerves. I was tired, and the station was quiet. Maybe I was just getting a little too jumpy. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. There was something about this place that made you feel like you weren't alone, even when you were. By the time the wind had stopped, I was back in the control room, trying to get into the rhythm of my shift again. The station was quiet, but it felt off. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. It wasn't just the emptiness of the place, though. It was like the silence had weight to it, like something was pressing in on me from all sides. I was flipping through some old logs, just trying to keep my mind busy, when I noticed the lights above flicker. It was quick, like a blink, but then it happened again, and again. 3 times in a row. I didn't have to look at my list to know what that meant. The rule was clear. If the light flickers more than 3 times in a row, hide in the control room. I had heard about places like this, old, abandoned stations, buildings that had been forgotten by time. People said they had a way of messing with your mind, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't taking any chances. The rules were there for a reason, and I wasn't about to ignore them. I stood up quickly, my chair scraping against the floor with a loud creak. My heart was racing, a sense of urgency pushing me to move faster. I locked the control room door behind me without even thinking. The sound of the lock catching echoed in the stillness, and I felt a little better knowing I was safe for now. The lights flickered again, casting strange shadows across the room. Flicker, flicker, flicker. Each time they went out, the station seemed to grow darker, almost like it was swallowing the light. I could feel my pulse thumping in my throat. I sat down in the dark, trying to calm my breathing. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Faint at first, but they grew louder with each passing second. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate steps echoing through the empty station. I froze, holding my breath. The footsteps didn't sound like they were coming from the platform. They weren't the usual noises that came from the trains or the wind. These were different. They were close, too close. I strained my ears, trying to catch any other sounds, but all I could hear was that slow, steady rhythm of footsteps, getting louder and louder. I looked around the control room, but I couldn't see anything. The window was too high up to look out onto the platform, and I wasn't about to leave the safety of the locked door, but I had to know where they were coming from. I pressed my ear to the cold wall, listening for any sign of movement. Tap, tap, tap. The footsteps were right outside, but the station was empty. There shouldn't have been anyone here. I stepped back, my mind racing. Maybe it was just the wind playing tricks on me. Maybe the old building was just settling, making sounds where there shouldn't be any. I didn't know, but I wasn't about to find out. I wasn't taking any more chances. I stayed there in the dark, listening to the footsteps grow quieter as they faded into the distance. The silence returned, but this time it felt even heavier than before. It was like the station was holding its breath, waiting for something. Something I couldn't see. Something that was still out there in the dark. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 4:30 a.m. Too early for anyone to be here. Too late for anyone to be making noise like that. My mind raced through the rules again. The one that stood out was clear. If you hear footsteps in the station, do not follow them. The words echoed in my head. The footsteps stopped right outside the control room. Silence. No more tapping, no more sound, just the heavy silence pressing in from all sides. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I couldn't move. I wanted to peek through the small window in the door, but something told me not to. If I did, if I saw what was out there, I wasn't sure I'd be able to handle it. I stayed still, barely breathing, barely thinking. I didn't know how long I waited, but eventually the footsteps faded, growing quieter and quieter until they were gone entirely. The station was silent again. The quiet didn't last long. After the footsteps had faded, I thought I could get some peace, but as I walked deeper into the station, I noticed something new. A door I hadn't seen before, tucked in a dark corner, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. It was the maintenance room. I'd heard about it, nothing good, just that it was off limits. But curiosity got the better of me, like it always does. I moved closer, my hand brushing the cold metal of the door. The handle felt oddly heavy as I turned it, and the door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the kind that settled in places that hadn't been touched in years. Old tools were scattered across the floor, and bits of machinery sat in the corner, half rusted, barely recognizable. It felt wrong, like the room hadn't just been forgotten, it had been purposely left behind. Then, the rule hit me. Never enter the maintenance room alone. I froze, a cold shiver running down my spine. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside. The room was pitch black. My eyes struggled to adjust, but the darkness felt like it was pressing in on me. The air was suffocating, and I could feel something in the room, something watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I had a sudden, overwhelming urge to leave. I fumbled for the door handle, my hands shaking. It wouldn't move. I tugged harder, panic starting to set in. My heart was racing now, my breath quickening. I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in around me. Finally, with a violent yank, the door gave way. I stumbled out of the room, gasping for air, and slammed the door shut behind me. The silence that followed was deafening, but I didn't feel alone anymore. Something was in that room, something that shouldn't have been. I wasn't sure what, but I knew I wouldn't go back near that door again. Not ever. Hours passed, and I could feel my nerves starting to get the best of me. The station felt off, like it was alive in some way. Every little sound, every gust of wind, felt like it was watching me, waiting for me to mess up. I kept seeing these shadows, moving around the corners of my vision. Every time I turned my head, they were gone, but I could swear they were getting closer. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks. It's an old station, and I've been alone for hours. Of course I'd start seeing things, but it didn't stop. The shadows kept reappearing. Every time I looked away, they were closer, like they were keeping track of me. Then I heard it, a soft voice. It was so faint, I almost missed it. It sounded like someone calling my name, Daniel. My whole body tensed up. I spun around, expecting someone to be standing there, but nothing. The station was empty, just the same old empty, silent place. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest. The silence felt different now, heavier. I tried to shake it off, but something wasn't right. I needed to get out of there. I headed for the door, grabbed the handle, and tried to turn it. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. I tried the other exits, but they were all locked, like the place was keeping me in. The station wasn't just a building anymore. It felt like a trap, and I was stuck inside it. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, but then I noticed the clock. The ticking had been steady, kind of like background noise, just another part of the station's rhythm. But then something strange happened. The second hand jerked. A sharp click echoed through the silence. Then it slowed, stuttering as if it was trying to catch up. And then it ticked backward. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was seeing things. But no, it was real. The second hand was moving in reverse. The sound of it tick, 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 but backwards. It didn't make any sense. Why is it doing this? I couldn't explain it. As soon as that happened, the station felt different. The air was thicker, heavier. The shadows in the corners of the room, where there was nothing before, seemed to stretch out, like they were reaching for me. My heart started pounding in my chest. I heard the sound again, this time clearer, footsteps. But not mine. They were closer. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate, like someone walking toward me. I felt my stomach drop. I shouldn't be hearing this. I shouldn't be hearing anyone. I turned and ran for the control room, my footsteps echoing down the dark hallway. The air felt colder now, like it was seeping into my skin. The lights flickered above me, the buzzing sound sharp in my ears. I slammed the door behind me, locking it as I breathed heavily. I pulled out the rule list, hands shaking, trying to focus. Never let the clock tick backward. Those words were staring back at me, and I couldn't ignore them. I was doing everything by the book. I hadn't broken any rules. So why was this happening? The ticking continued. Tick, 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 each backward movement like a punch in the gut. I had to stop it. I knew I had to fix this. I couldn't let it keep going. But how the hell was I supposed to fix something like this? I couldn't stop the clock. No matter how hard I stared at it, willing it to stop, it just kept ticking backward, like it had a mind of its own. The second hand jerked again, and the sound tick, tick, tick was now in sync with the pounding in my chest. It felt like it was pulling everything around me into its twisted rhythm. And then the station changed. The air grew heavier, colder. It felt like I was breathing in something thick, like I was stuck in a fog I couldn't shake off. The walls felt closer, pressing in on me, and the silence was deafening, broken only by the relentless ticking of the clock. It was like the whole place had woken up. I could hear murmurs, faint voices drifting through the air. At first, they were hard to make out like whispers on the wind, but then they grew clearer. Familiar voices. Voices I recognized, my family, my wife, my kids. They were here, but not like they should be. I blinked, and when I looked up, I saw them. They were walking down the platform, moving slowly, like they were caught in some kind of trance. Their faces were twisted, not in fear, but in pain. Frozen, as if time had forgotten them. They didn't look at me, didn't even seem to notice I was there. It was like I was invisible, or maybe they couldn't see me because they weren't really here. I felt my stomach turn. What the hell is this? The station felt like a living thing now, like it was feeding on the past, on memories, on the souls it had trapped in its walls. And I was just another one of those souls, a prisoner in a place I didn't understand. I stumbled back, but the platform stretched out endlessly before me. There was no escape, no way out. The clock kept ticking, pulling me deeper into whatever nightmare this place had become. And all I could do was watch, helpless, as my family, my past walked away from me, trapped in this endless cycle. The more the clock ticked backward, the clearer the figures became. They weren't just blurry memories anymore. These were people, real people, my family. They were walking down the platform, but their eyes, they weren't focused on anything. They didn't see me. Then I heard it, their voices, faint like they were calling from far away. "Dad," one of them whispered. It was soft at first, like a gust of wind. "Dad." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I knew those voices. The way they said it, There was no mistaking it. My wife, my kids, but they weren't the same. They were twisted, frozen in time, their faces locked in agony. It hit me all at once. This station wasn't just a building. It was a trap, and I wasn't here by accident. I was just like them now, stuck, trapped in this place, waiting to be swallowed by it. "Dad," the voice called again, this time louder. "Please don't leave us." I knew what I had to do. The clock, this damned thing, was the key, the curse, and the only way out was to destroy it. Not just stop it, but destroy it. I couldn't let it keep going. I couldn't let it trap anyone else. I stood there, staring at the clock. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were shaking. The ticking was louder now, almost deafening. Tick, tick, tick. Each one felt like it was tearing through me. Their voices echoed in my ears, trying to pull me back into their world. "Dad," it was them again. "Come with us." But I couldn't. I couldn't stay. I had to escape. Then, without thinking, I reached out. My fist slammed into the clock, the glass shattering under the force. I didn't stop. Over and over again, my fist hit the clock, the sound of each blow echoing through the station. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't care. I had to break it. I had to stop the curse before it took me completely. I hit the clock again, harder this time. The glass shattered, and the sound rang out, sharp and loud. For a second, everything stopped. It was like the whole station held its breath. Then, one by one, the figures, my family, faded into the shadows. They didn't scream anymore. They didn't stare at me. They were just gone. The walls of the station didn't feel so close anymore. The air felt lighter, almost normal. It was like the weight had been lifted off my chest. I stood there for a long time, still catching my breath. My hands were shaking. I couldn't make sense of what had just happened. It didn't feel real. I looked down at the broken clock, all the pieces scattered around the floor. The second hand, the cracked face, everything was destroyed. And that's when I realized I had done it. I had broken it. The station, it wasn't trapping me anymore. I wasn't stuck here with the ghosts of my family. But the relief didn't come right away. It felt like something was missing. Like I wasn't really free. Not yet. I thought about my kids, my wife. I saw them in my mind, their faces twisted in pain, walking down that platform like they were stuck in time. Had I really freed them? Or was it too late? The guilt hit me like a wave. I had destroyed the clock, but what about them? Was it enough? I shook my head, trying not to think about it. I couldn't stay here. The station was still trying to pull me back in, but I couldn't let it. I couldn't be its prisoner anymore. I walked toward the door, my legs feeling like they hadn't moved in years. When I reached it, I hesitated. Just for a second. I wanted to look back, to make sure I hadn't missed something, but I couldn't. I couldn't face it again. Not now. The door opened without a struggle, and I stepped out. The station was behind me. The curse was gone. And even though I wasn't sure how everything would play out from here, I knew one thing. I was free. I didn't look back. I just walked away. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe for more creepy tales. If you'd like to support the channel, consider buying me a coffee on Ko-Fi. Every bit helps. Links in the description.